Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to Patrick Come Lately Talk Radio. This is Stephen, your host, British by birth, American by choice. The Founding Fathers crafted some remarkable documents that led to the creation of a great country founded on liberty and self-reliance. I have lived in the Euro-socialist nightmare, and I'm doing what I can to return this country to the vision that the Founding Fathers gave us. We need to strive to rebuild that shining city on the hill, for without us, the world has nowhere to turn for freedom. For the next hour, I will be presenting news, views, and guests that help keep the true spirit of America alive. And good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever, whenever you're listening to the show. This is Stephen, your Patrick Come Lately, British by birth, American by choice, welcoming you to episode 195. And we've got a great show coming up. We've got John Hancock as guest, the author of Liberty Inherited, and also a great essay that we had discussed about 4 weeks ago. And now we're coming back to talk about a very key point in history and one that had a huge impact on our Founding Fathers, but also very applicable, very relevant to today. I see there seem to be some problems with the audio there. I hope it's not my microphone. But just give me a heads up if there's no audio. I've got audio here. Unfortunately, there's no way to see if there's audio on the screen. And there we are. There's John. As I said, John has been on the show a couple of times. A great book that he has, Liberty Inherited. If you haven't read it, I can heartily recommend it. It really explains a lot of why America is so exceptional, because it took a way of, well, how shall I say, a way of governing that had developed in the Anglo-Saxon world and refined it. And unfortunately in Britain, the home of the Anglo-Saxons, they actually lost that approach to government, but it lived on in America, and that's really, you can see how that developed and how it influenced our Founding Fathers. Anyway, I'm going to bring my guest in, John. John, are you there?
Yes, Stephen. Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good. I was worried that Mary wasn't able to hear, that it might have been my microphone, but if you can hear me, then it must be going out over the airwaves. So.
No, I can hear you fine.
Good. Well, you probably heard a little bit of my introduction there. That great book, and I still think it's one of the best sort of non-fiction books that I've read, Liberty Inherited. It really opened my eyes to a lot of things. Your essay that we talked about 4 weeks ago as well. But tonight we're going to talk about a specific part of Liberty Inherited, and that was the Glorious Revolution, right?
Right. I do want to add, we basically see over a 500-year period an evolution. You had Anglo-Saxons come into the Netherlands, and they came into England. And what you see is in England was a traditional struggle between who had supremacy, the Parliament or the monarchy. And that was the big struggle between Tories and Whigs. The Whigs thought that the that the Parliament had the final say when there was a dispute with the monarchy over governing of the country, and the Tories thought that the monarchy should have the final say when there was a dispute. The Glorious Revolution of 1689 settled that, in favor of the Parliament. That gave parliamentary supremacy to English politics. But to explain that in 1776, what happened was the American colonies, which weren't American colonies, they were British colonies, they saw, throughout the history that what happens when a king becomes too powerful, and then leading up to the American Revolution, they saw what happens when a parliament becomes too powerful. So the American Revolution took it a step further and not only put restraints on the king, but it also built in checks and balances that put restraints on the legislative body, which in our case, it's the Congress.
Right. Unfortunately, and as we discuss, I bring to the table every week, unfortunately, the current Congress, the current administration, is not really living up to those original ideals. And anyway, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that this evening. But let's, for listeners that haven't read your book, let's perhaps take a step back and perhaps sketch a little bit what was going on in England at the time of what is now called the Glorious Revolution, and just digging back in my history and your book. And actually, I learned more from your book than I ever did at my school history, so I have to commend you for that, John. But at the time, it was one of the Jameses, King James II, if I remember rightly.
Yes.
Was king, and he was actually a Catholic, while the majority of the country was actually Protestant. But the Catholics were fairly strong. There were a number of key lords, barons, etc., that were Catholics. So James was sort of pushing the Catholic faith at the time, right? And he was making laws so that were basically allowing the Catholics to garner power. So that was more or less the situation. Do I explain it right?
Yes, but it's more than religion. There was a political part of Catholicism that we don't see today, but that was very real back then. One of the things with Catholicism back then was that it was associated with the absolutism that was being practiced on the continent, mainly in France and Spain. The idea that the divine right was a very Catholic principle. It came from Catholicism, where the king was a representative of God on earth. And whatever he said, basically he was speaking in the name of God. And to disobey the king not only put your mortal life in danger, it also put your immortal soul in danger because you were disobeying God. And this whole concept of authoritarianism and absolutism, where basically the king's law in those countries was basically whatever words came out of the king's mouth, as one of the French kings put it. In England, it was a very different system. The king always had some sort of restraint on him. He had to work with the Parliament. One of the big ones was his power to raise taxes. Had to go to a Parliament and get approval for that. That came out of the Magna Carta back in 1215. So he didn't have this power. And James II wanted that power. He thought it was, he was a monarch. He shouldn't have to be restrained by these limits that the English Constitution, which is like English common law, it evolved over time. It wasn't a written constitution as we think of today, but it evolved over time. He thought he shouldn't be constrained by that. He should be able to do what like the French kings or the Spanish kings do and decree everything. So he decided that he was going to go out and fundamentally change England. And he thought the best way to do that was to basically make Catholicism the primary religion of England again, and undo that Protestantism that he saw was at the root of the English political system.
Was his middle name Barry by any chance?
No, but the similarities are striking. You know, if someone wants to, and that was part of the reason I wrote my book. Once I realized that James II, what he tried to do in England, you know, there's an echo there. I mean, it just, if someone wants proof that history repeats itself, read what James II tried to do. It's the same thing.
Right.
James II used what was called royal prerogatives to try to get around Parliament, just like Obama tries to use executive orders to get around Parliament or to get around Congress, and they were using them in ways that they weren't intended for. Lots of times, just like now, they were intended for parliamentary or budgetary reasons. You know, the discretionary type of minor decisions. They weren't designed to change the country or to give the executive power over Parliament. That was completely contrary to the British system, or the English at the time, the English system of government. And we see that. And then we see gun control was a big part. And that was one of the big tipping points, because James II saw that having the common Englishmen armed was an obstacle, because most of them were Protestant and most of them were against what he was trying to do. He saw that as an obstacle to getting absolute power. So he decreed that Englishmen can only have guns that are for hunting and sporting purposes only. You know, and this is in 1688. So we see this repeat of history again. The difference then is that the English rose up when they got pushed to a point and got rid of James II. It'll be, you know, we still have to see what the Americans are going to do.
Yeah, but as you said, you know, a lot of parallels between then and now. But again, let's go back to then. So James was doing all this. It wasn't just religion, but he was basically making that power grab. And at a certain point, some of the lords got together and said, you know what, we don't like this, and they invited someone else to come in and be king.
Right. Some of the stuff that it got so bad that James II, his court was empty by the time 1688 came around, and this was within about a 4-year period. He came to power about 1685, and when his son, or when his brother Charles II died, Charles II had no heirs, and a lot of, you know, by the time 1688 came around, a lot of the lords and the barons and dukes and stuff, they were staying in their country houses. They weren't even coming into London to go to his court, and so that was a big indicator that he had lost all influence, except for a small minority of Catholic nobility. So the tipping point came when James II, his wife did not have any children, so there was no heir. So everybody thought they could just ride this out. His brother died fairly young. James II was already close to that age. They said, you know, let's just let nature take its course. He'll die, and his daughter from his first marriage, which was Mary, she was married to William of Orange. She was Catholic, Protestant, very brought up in the Protestant faith, and it would go to her, and then everything would be back to normal. They would have a Protestant monarch ruling a Protestant people. But out of nowhere, you know, the supposedly barren queen had a child. And there was a lot of suspicion that this was what they call a bedpan child, that the child was snuck in to the chamber. No one really even saw the queen being pregnant because she was hidden away for 9 months. And the child they suspect was snuck into the chamber in order to create a Catholic heir to the throne. And one of the strange things was usually when a queen has a baby, there's a group of people that are there to witness it. Not only the family, but there are from both sides of Parliament. There are people there to witness it to verify that the child was actually from the Queen. In this case, the only witnesses to the birth of this child were from the Catholic part of the nobility. None of the opposition was invited to see this. It was all done behind doors, closed doors. So there was a lot of suspicion of that. And once they realized that, wait a minute, this could leave us with the Catholic monarchy till who knows when, then they decided to move. And one of the leaders of that his name was John Churchill, who was Winston Churchill's grandfather, or great-grandfather. He'd become the Duke of Marlborough. But he was one of the leaders, and they wrote a letter to the William of Orange of Holland, asking him to come over and replace James II and to become the King of England.
Yeah. Okay, and I just want to kind of jump back, John, a couple of things just for the listeners. That habit of having this plethora of people actually there at the birth continued, I think, until the last sort of royal child born before Queen Elizabeth. So I think in the 30s was the last time that happened. I don't think that they did it for when Elizabeth herself was born, but kind of the generation before that, they were still doing this thing where all sorts of people were present at the birth, and they definitely don't do it today, as we know, of course, from the recent royal birth. That was definitely, in some respects, a low-key event compared to what they used to do.
Right, and it's changed now. You have a doctor, and it's more public in a way. It's a lot different than when they gave birth in a in a castle somewhere, away from prying eyes.
Yeah.
In some ways, they had to do that because it wasn't really a public affair.
Right. And then, so as we were saying, you said John Churchill, who became Duke of Marlborough, then wrote a letter to William of Orange, who was now. And again, I need to get my history correct here. I believe he was not actually King of Holland. He was what we call the Stadthouder, which was sort of almost an elected king, if I remember rightly.
Yes, and it was usually the family, which is called the Orange. They were the Oranges. They were the most powerful family in Holland, which was the biggest, and I think it still is, the biggest province of the biggest state of the Netherlands, of the Netherlands Republic. And they usually get it, but it's not guaranteed. There's a lot of politicking for the person who ever becomes stadtholder to do. There's often a contract that lays out what his power is and what he can do and cannot do. So William, the Prince of Orange, was very much accustomed to already working within a limited monarchy, a monarchy that was limited constitutionally. And what is interesting, like I started off at the beginning of the show, is that the Netherlands and sorry about that, and England were both settled by Saxons. So they both had a Saxon form of government.
Right. And as some of my listeners will know from previous shows, whoops, I'm getting a little bit of feedback there. Sorry, the feedback's putting me off. There is a Dutch connection for me because, of course, my wife is Dutch. I lived in the Netherlands for a while, and so I found this rather interesting, this whole thing about our dear friend William of Orange. Okay, John, I'm going to take a quick break now because I've got, it's time for a commercial, and after we come back from the break, we'll talk about that letter and then what happened, and of course it goes back to Guy Fawkes Night. That was about a month ago, and that was sort of the start of some of the things. So we'll talk again after this break, folks. If I can find the right place to click here. Yes. There we go.
Are you at least 62 years old like me? Could you use an extra $50,000, $100,000 or more to live a better life? Then please consider the benefits a reverse mortgage can provide to you. With a reverse mortgage, you can have your mortgage payments stopped altogether and get equity out of your home to live on. And you can use the money to help you live a better life. How nice would that be, not to have a mortgage payment? Qualifying for a reverse mortgage is simple, since there are no income, asset, employment, or credit requirements. However, you must be 62 years or older, own your home outright, or have a very low balance on the mortgage, and be prepared to live in it throughout the rest of the loan. Call now for more information.
800-704-1662. 800-704-1662, 800-704-1662. That's 800-704-1662.
I will never forget the day my son Jeremy told me he hated me and slammed the door in my face. I'm behavioral therapist Janet Lehman. Behavior problems can turn the child you love and your life into a nightmare. That's why my husband James and I created the Total Transformation, a step-by-step program that shows you how to fix the worst behavior problems and get your child to respect and listen to you again. No matter what the behavior, defiance, backtalk, angry outbursts, disrespect, we can help you stop it. Now you can get the Total Transformation for free. All you need to do is get the program and let us know how it works for you. You can keep it forever for free.
Limited number of free programs available. Call now. 1-800-259-1409. 1-800-259-1409. 1-800-259-1409. That's 1-800-259-1409.
This is Patrick Come Lately Talk Radio, coming to you live via the internet, via rebroadcast on WRSDB, the Red State Talk Radio Network, or from the recordings at archives.patrickcomelately.us. And there's a little bit of an echo there. I hope it doesn't disturb our guest too much. John, are you picking that echo up as well?
No, not on the phone. It's perfect. Everything's clear.
Okay, good. Then I'm having more of a problem than you are, but I can turn my headphones down. But then, of course, I can't hear you. But we'll see how that goes. Anyway, so we talked about the nobles in England saying, well, you know, they were getting fed up with James II and everything he was doing, so they wrote a letter to this Prince of Orange, William, who was married to, as you said, the first child of James. So there was sort of a, if you like, a little bit of a legal way for them to bring him in. But, of course, James wasn't going to take it lying down. So what happened next?
Well, they invited William over, and William set sail with the Dutch army, and on November 5th, Guy Fawkes Day, they ended up arriving in England at Torbay. And they landed there. They were met with some of the barons from England, and James had a large army. Now, this was something that was unique at the time, because English-speaking nations traditionally did not have a standing army. Their armies were allowed to serve outside the country, but they weren't allowed to have really a standing army within the country. As we kind of, if anybody's familiar with our system at the time of the Revolution, or even at the time of the American Civil War, we had a small regular army. But even up to the Spanish-American War, it was when there was an emergency, it was done by militias. So you had all these militias around, but you weren't. It was actually against the English Constitution to keep a standing army, and James did keep a standing army of about 20,000 soldiers, and he appointed to them Catholic officers, mainly Irish. And he basically filled the ranks with Irish Catholics. So it wasn't even an English army at that point. It was more of an Irish Catholic army. And so the question was, would that army fight for James II and against the Dutch? And when the Dutch arrived, within about 2 weeks, as they moved inland, more and more of the English units that were still part of the English army, James's army, defected over to William. In fact, when his fleet set sail across the channel, the English Navy refused to even leave the harbor. And they correctly declared for William as soon as William landed. And what ended up happening is that they, within about a month and a half, that army that James had completely disintegrated. Once the English unit started to switch sides and go over to William, the Irish soldiers started to desert and try to make their way back to Ireland. Unfortunately, they don't really say what happened to many of them, but the outcome wasn't too good when they were found. So his army just disintegrated, and James decided he was going to try to get away. So there's two versions of the story. One said that he dressed as a woman and tried to escape, and the other one was he dressed as a common fisherman. But he made it to a port, and he was captured there. Some people recognized him. They brought him back to London. And this caused a problem for William, because William realized he can't kill him because he would create a martyr. He can't leave him in England because technically James is still the King of England. He still has a right to the throne. So he conveniently lets James escape, and James makes his way over into France, where he tries to recapture different schemes to come back and recapture the throne of England, and that's where you have the Jacobites come from. It's the Latin form of James, and they were trying to get him reinstalled back to the throne. He landed in Ireland with the French army. The Irish rose up, and William went over there and pretty much slaughtered them all. So that was the beginning, or a lot of the bloodiness that went on between the English and the Irish. That just was another chapter there. But once he left, then there was a problem with who is the king, because technically they forced the king to leave. And this is a unique thing, again, in the English-speaking countries or countries with the Saxon system of law. They will allow a king or I'll say an executive, whether it be a president or even a king, to operate. But that king had to operate within the customs and traditions of the country, basically what we would call a constitution. And as soon as the head of the government stepped out of that, then they felt like the people felt they could rise up and get rid of him, that he has violated his position of power. This was something that didn't happen in France this way, or Spain or anywhere else, and it was seen as a system to rein in the king or to keep the country constitutional. So the Constitution and the political traditions and the government, the way it was functioning, was above the king. So the king, basically, this is where we say even the king was not above English law.
Right, and that was really a change for Europe. Okay, John, it's time for another break, and after the break, before we go further and talk a little bit about the relevance to today, we've mentioned some of that, but I also want to talk about the Irish situation, because there's some things that happened then that we still, we see the results today. But before we do that, of course, it's time for some commercials, so we'll be back after these messages.
150 million people suffer from headaches. All you want is for the pounding in your head to stop. Migralex stops the pounding. Migralex was developed by a neurologist and founder of the New York Headache Center.
I'm neurologist Dr. Alex Mauskov. After studying and researching the human brain for 25 years, I've developed Migralex, which eliminates pounding headaches. It works for my patients, and I'm so convinced it will work for you, I don't just guarantee it, I put my name on it.
Dr. Mouskov's Migralex gets rid of headaches fast without harsh caffeine, sodium, or preservatives.
Migralex works unbelievably fast, and it's gentle on my stomach.
Find out how to get your free bottle of Migralex. Call 800-559-3307. Plus, if you're one of the first 100 callers, you'll also receive the Migralex Quick Tips to Headache Relief absolutely free. That's 800-559-3307. Or go to migralexrelief.com. MIGRALEX relief.com. Or call 800-559-3307.
Why spend more than you have to on your life insurance? Did you know that term life insurance rates have fallen over 60% in the last 15 years? At the Life Insurance Quote Line, we monitor the rates, features, and financial strength of hundreds of life insurance products. For example, a healthy 40-year-old can protect his family with $500,000 of 10-year level term for less than $20 a month. Rates for women are even lower. And don't forget to ask us about the new term life policies that guarantee your money back even if you don't die. Since 1986, we've helped tens of thousands of people just like you save a fortune on their life insurance. Why not find out how much you can save? Write down this number and call today for your free quote. 1 5-minute call is all it takes. Call 800-915-9734. 800-915-9734. That's 800-915-9734. Rates, policy forms, and availability vary by state.
Limited time offer, a 24-month commitment. Qualification required. Cancellation fee, auto pay, and paperless billing, and other restrictions apply. If you can't see the difference, why pay the difference? Switch to Dish for the best deal in entertainment. Only Dish brings you the best in entertainment for less than $20 a month. Cut the cable and don't get directed. Switch to Dish because at just $19.99, Dish saves you every time you turn on the TV. It's so simple. The same channels cost less with Dish. So since you can't see the difference, don't pay the difference. Switch to Dish for the best deal in entertainment. Get premium movie channels free for 3 months, starting at just $19.99. Dish saves you every time you turn on the TV. Call now to save with Dish. Dial 1-800-865-5017. That's 1-800-865-5017. The same channels for less than $20 a month. Dish. Call 1-800-865-5017 for details.
This is Patrick Come Lately Talk Radio, keeping the spirit of America alive. A proud member of the Red State Talk Radio Network. And we're back in the second half of the show. This is Stefan, your Patrick Come Lately, talking to John Hancock, author of Liberty Inherited, and look it up on Amazon. It's a great book if you haven't read it, and it's a great book to give as a Christmas present. Christmas is coming up. Can hardly recommend that book. Really tells you about how the founding fathers came to produce the fantastic documents that we did. John, I said before the break, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Irish situation. You mentioned the fact that the Jacobites tried to use the Irish, who were very Catholic, and again, religion comes back into all of this, although it wasn't perhaps the main driver, but it was an important thing there. They tried to use the Irish, so William obviously did put down the Irish and killed a lot of them, and also imported a lot of people that were friendly to him, so basically a lot of them coming from Scotland, and moved them into what is now Northern Ireland. And of course the sectarian violence that we had in the 60s, 70s in Northern Ireland, a lot of that is due to William, and you hear them talking about the Orange Men in Northern Ireland. That's because they were supporters of William of Orange.
Yeah, and we got to realize what the situation was for William. You know, the Netherlands borders with France, who at the time was controlled by Louis XIV, and of course Louis XIV was an ally of James II. So William had to quickly take care of England and consolidate his position there, and then get his army back to the Netherlands before France decided to strike at his home country. So he had to really move extremely fast, and this created a situation where he had to take some extreme measures in order to put down this invasion in Ireland. And I don't know if the pronunciation is correct, but I believe it's the Battle of Boyne was a big one down there, and they ended up, just massacring the Irish. And then afterwards, he like you mentioned, he brought in the people to consolidate the power there, and basically control the country, because he had to quickly return back and get the Dutch army back into the Netherlands. Because we need to realize that at this time, there really wasn't an English army. The English army disintegrated. And again, what I'd like to point for today, how things are today, if you know this, we call the British Navy the Royal Navy. We call the British Air Force the Royal Air Force. But it's the British Army. It's not the Royal Army. And that was because the king never really had control over the army. The army is considered an asset of the British people and not the monarchy. So even to this day, we can see that connection coming forward.
Yes, and that's very true. There are some parts of the army that are very, very much allied or related to the monarchy, and we see that at things like Trooping the Colour. But the army in general was, as you said, was not royal. It was independent.
Right, and most of the time it would be considered more of the tool of Parliament than it was of the king, which was very different than it was, again, on the continent or pretty much anywhere else in the world. The army in English-speaking countries weren't really a tool of oppression of their own people. And that's a very big distinction that again, carries forward to this day, that whether you're in the UK, United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the army is not a tool of oppression. They aren't there to enforce things on people, on their own people.
I'd like to say for the United States wasn't a tool of impression, but I spoke last week about there are signs that dear leader is trying to change that, and I want to make the comment. There was Mary commented in the chat room. It's interesting that the King of England wasn't above the law, but the POTUS thinks he is. Now, of course, King James II thought that he was in the same position that King Barry is trying to put himself above the law, and the nobles got rid of him. What can we do to get rid of King Barry?
Right, and the nobles couldn't do it by themselves. So, I mean, they had popular support. They were the ones that just led the Glorious Revolution. And again, I'd like to point out that the Glorious Revolution itself, other than the battles that were fought in Ireland, the English part of it that took place in England was bloodless. There was not one shot fired for the Glorious Revolution. And that's amazing when we see the aftermath, because I want to point out that look around the world, the world you live in. Look at the prosperity. Look at the form of government, representative democracy that we have, here in the United States, but basically in many parts of the world, not even the English-speaking parts of the world. And you see all this prosperity and freedom and this form of government. That all originated from 1688 and then the Declaration of Rights in 1689, because that brought in England, that brought in the modern form of government. Basically, the form of government that was established in 1688 is still the same form of government that Britain, that the UK has today.
Yeah, the constitutional
and it's been modernized, but it's basically the same.
Yeah. I said the constitutional monarchy.
Right.
John, right? It's basically the head of state, but with very limited and defined powers.
Yes, and it evolved. Initially, the king was the executive, and then he relied on certain ministers, and there would always be one minister that was his prime minister that he relied on, and over time, that prime minister became more and more powerful, and the king became more and more or the monarch became more and more of a figurehead, which evolved into the modern British system that we have today. So, well, go on.
Well, I was going to say, and not just in the UK as well, for example, to take it back to William's homeland, in the Netherlands as well, very much a constitutional monarchy. Some of the other countries like Denmark, Sweden, they kind of copied the British and evolved into that same constitutional kind of monarchy.
Right, and of course they were already agreeable to it because of they shared that same Saxon lineage. And I would like to point out something, that how important it is to recognize that our system came from the Saxons and specifically the Anglo-Saxons. Thomas Jefferson wanted to, basically like the Israelis did with Hebrew, when the United States was established, he wanted to resurrect the Anglo-Saxon language and make that the official language of the United States. And he even went so far that he wanted it taught in schools to grade school children, and he even drew up a grammar book to be used in the schools to teach children how to read, write, and speak the Anglo-Saxon language, because he wanted them to be able to learn about their rights and their freedoms and their liberties in the language from which it came. And he wasn't successful in that, but he was successful in getting the University of Virginia at the time to teach Beowulf in the original Anglo-Saxon, which Beowulf is the big Anglo-Saxon, the big piece of the literature that exists to this day, that is still performed to this day.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. That really is an interesting part of it. Would have been interesting if that had happened.
Right. Yeah. Well, and just to let you know, I did update my book, and there's like 30% new material because I've continued researching. So there's 30% new material. I have 2 bonus chapters. One is by Thomas Jefferson and his Rights of Englishmen in British America, which he wrote in 1774. And then I also have a chapter by William Young, who was a British essayist and a parliamentarian. And in 1783, he wrote an essay about the rights of Englishmen. And those are in there. The book is not on Kindle, but if someone's interested, they can go to johnlhancock.com and pre-order it. And I'm getting, we'll basically be shipping copies out on the 17th of this month.
Okay, well, commercial for John's book there, and we will repeat the website in the last segment of the show. But in the meanwhile, it's time for the final set of commercials. So, John, just hang on for another couple of minutes, and then we'll get into the last discussions about the Glorious Revolution. Okay, folks. So, as I said, hang on there, and we will be right back.
Are you tired of commuting to a job that makes someone else rich, working harder than ever, but getting nowhere? Do you hate spending hundreds of dollars every week on daycare, having someone else raise your children? With our opportunities, you can start earning money as soon as next week. You get to be the boss, work from home, and live a happier life. At Be the Boss Network, you'll find hundreds of work-from-home opportunities that you can literally start today and be earning money as soon as next week. Go to freedom112.com and start earning money as soon as next week. You get to be the boss. Get out of the rat race. Work from home. Go to freedom112.com right now and change your life today. That's freedom112.com. Go to freedom112.com and start earning money as soon as next week. You be the boss. Go to freedom112.com.
Are you paying too much for your car insurance policy? Have you shopped your current plan in the last year? If you haven't, then you probably are paying too much. You could save up to 40% on your current car insurance coverage just by making a free call right now. Doesn't it make good sense to pay less for something you have to pay for anyway? And car insurance is one of those things. You've got to have car insurance, whether you have 1 car or 10 cars. So why not see if you can pay a lot less for it right now? One quick 3-minute call, and you could save hundreds of dollars on your car insurance. We'll compare the leading car insurance companies and get you coverage that could save you up to 40% on your car insurance. Call now for a free quote. Call 800-603-9980. 800-603-9980. 800-603-9980. 800-603-9980. That's 800-603-9980.
This is Patrick Come Lately Talk Radio, coming to you live via the internet, via rebroadcast on WRSDB, the Red State Talk Radio Network, or from the recordings at archives.patrickcomelately.us.
And we're into the last segment of the show. This is Stephanie or Patrick Come Lately talking with John Hancock, author of the book Liberty Inherited. And as I said before the break, John, just a reminder to the people, you can get Liberty Inherited on Amazon, on Kindle, but the latest version is not there yet, correct?
No, that will be after the first of the year. I'll have it on the Kindle, and this is basically a commemorative edition to celebrate the 325th anniversary of the Glorious Revolution. So it's a special edition that I created just for this year.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we had John back on the show today, because round about today, I don't know, was it today or tomorrow? that was the kind of the official day that William did actually was able to take power. He landed November 5th, which became Guy Fawkes Day. And I'm trying to think, and then the whole thing. So roundabout now was that when he took when he got crowned, when he had the coronation, or?
Well, no. Basically, James fled around the 11th, the night of the 11th of December. But then there was a bunch of political haggling for a whole year, and of course, during that year, William was in Ireland, putting down the Jacobites, and it took about a year, and then it was December 19th that of 1689 that they came up with what's called the Declaration of Rights, and this was a document that William had to accept to become King of England, and this laid out the rights of Englishmen, and it was very similar to a lot of rights like habeas corpus was in there, the right to bear arms. You know, there's, like I list in my book, there's a bunch of rights that people will easily recognize as rights that are in the Constitution. And the reason for this is because the Declaration of Rights of 1689 was the template for the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. So this was a very important document, and this is what they, you know, we always hear, or if you watch the movie, and I mentioned this before, John Adams, the HBO miniseries, at the very beginning, leading up to the Declaration of Independence, they kept saying that George III and Parliament in England, or in Britain, was violating their rights as Englishmen. Well, where did they get their rights as Englishmen, or they would say freeborn Englishmen? That was from the Declaration of Rights of 1689. See, we need to look at the American Revolution as not a new revolution. What they were doing was they were fighting to return the British colonies back to the rights that they were guaranteed under the Declaration of Rights of 1689, and that George III and Parliament was attempting to deny them.
Yep. So, folks, you see, it's all a big circle. It all goes around. I hear in the chat room that the echo is still pretty bad, so my apologies for that. John, thanks for coming on today. It was great talking to you, and it was good that you were able to do so much talking because there's less echo coming from you, I think. So, and you're not hearing it. But thanks for coming on. Good luck with the release of the book. As I said, I think it's a great book, folks, to read, and especially with these new chapters. Probably some more interesting material there.
Yeah, and I just kind of fleshed out some of the other topics in there, too. So
Yeah, and John, very quickly, we've got about 30, 40 seconds. Tell us about your exciting news and your trip to the UK.
Well, I was invited by Daniel Hannan as a special guest of a conference of British conservatives down in Surrey, which is south of London, next month. So I'll be spending a week in England or in the UK, but one day I'll be spending with Daniel Hannan for the day going to these events.
Well, that's a great honor for you, John. And whereabouts in Surrey are you going?
I don't know if I pronounce it right, but Woking, W-O-K-I-N-G.
Yeah, Woking. Yeah, I used to live. I spent a year there. I haven't lived a lot in the UK in spite of my background, long story. But I did live near Woking, and it's a very nice part of the countryside there. Okay, John. Well, thanks a lot for coming on. Good luck with your trip, and maybe we'll have you back on and hear about your trip to the UK and and your meeting with Daniel Hannan.
Thank you, sir. It's always a pleasure to be on.
Okay, maybe you can twist Daniel's arm. Maybe we can get him on the show one time as well.
Yeah, I'll mention it because he's pushing his book right now too.
Okay. Thanks a lot, John. Good night.
Okay, good night. Bye bye.
Okay, folks. Again, apologies for the echo. Although it seems to have gone away, it might have been something to do with John's phone there because I don't hear the echo anymore. Next week, the show will be coming from Canada, so I hope that I'm going to be a little tight I will be traveling that evening, but I should be in the hotel in time. But if I'm late, apologies for that. Hopefully, I will be able to get the show going, and we'll see. I've got a lot of news and views that I want to handle. So, folks, it's I see time for the music to start. TTFN, ta-ta for now. Thanks for joining me, and hope to see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the show. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's topics. Whether you listened live, to a recording, or to a rebroadcast, I appreciate the time you share with me. We need to spread the message of liberty far and wide, so please tell your friends and family about the show. Thank you for helping to keep the beacon of hope burning. This is Stephen, your Patrick Come Lately, signing off. God bless America, and remember, L3, long live liberty.